Cody Rhodes is one of wrestling's most controversial figures, and through his ambiguous character, he has become one of the most disliked wrestlers in wrestling today. It's actually quite ironic because once upon a time, he was one of the biggest, most cheered for babyfaces in wrestling in general. And despite him still being a babyface today, every time he appears on AEW now, this is the fans' reaction.
Boo this man!
How did a man so beloved by fans become so despised and detested? The answer to this question is extremely nuanced, but this is exactly what makes Cody Rhodes as a character so fascinating and compelling. He constantly teeters on the edge of being a good guy and a bad guy, and this leaves the fans in a constant state of interest, as everybody wants to know the answer. Is Cody Rhodes an angel or is he a devil? In reality, he's both of these things and none of them at the same time, but we'll get to that later on in the video. Cody Rhodes is the son of wrestling legend Dusty Rhodes, and Dusty started training Cody when Cody was 12 years old, and through Dusty, Cody Rhodes was signed to a developmental contract when he was 20 years old in Ohio Valley Wrestling, which is a developmental territory for WWE. And just a year after he was signed to OVW, he was promoted to the main roster, and on the main roster, Cody Rhodes showcased his talent as he won the Intercontinental Championship twice, and he was a 6-time tag team champion with 4 different partners. But it always seemed to the fans that Cody Rhodes had the talent and capabilities to be a world champion in WWE, but it always felt that management was never fully behind him, and this manifested in the god-awful Stardust gimmick he was given. The Stardust gimmick was kind of a mini version of his older brother Goldust, and quite honestly, this gimmick was pretty terrible. But nonetheless, Cody Rhodes marched on, and in 2015, his father Dusty Rhodes passed away, and this crushed Cody Rhodes. After his father passed away, Cody felt that he had nothing to be afraid of anymore, and so he zeroed in on being his authentic self, and he requested his release from WWE, and WWE reluctantly obliged. He had always played a heel for the majority of the time when he was in WWE, and when he got into the independents, he played a heel as well, and he also started making appearances in Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling, and he joined the villainous Bullet Club, and in the Bullet Club, his brilliant heel persona really shone through. In the Bullet Club, Cody Rhodes met Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, and was featured heavily on the YouTube show Being the Elite, which catered heavily to fans in the West who were clamoring for an alternative to WWE, and him and the Elite became internet sensations through Being the Elite. And in 2017, Dave Meltzer said that it was not possible for 10,000 seats to be sold in America for a wrestling show that wasn't WWE, and Cody Rhodes responded by basically saying challenge accepted. Even though he was a heel at this time, this is when the babyface momentum started for Cody Rhodes, as it was only right to root for a guy who was carrying a wrestling revolution on his back. And this all led to All In, a show organized and promoted by Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, which indeed sold 10,000 tickets, and this was a huge feat for a wrestling show that wasn't WWE in America. At All In, Cody Rhodes turned face as he won the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship and became the first ever second-generation star to win the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, as his father Dusty won it 3 times before. And at this point, you couldn't help but cheer for Cody Rhodes, and his babyface momentum grew even more. All In led to billionaire Tony Khan approaching the Young Bucks and Cody Rhodes to create a new wrestling promotion to take on WWE, and just like that, All Elite Wrestling AEW was born. And at AEW's first ever show, Double or Nothing 2019, Cody Rhodes faced off against his brother Dustin Rhodes in a match that was billed as Generation versus Generation, Attitude Era versus Modern Era, and Brother versus Brother. Before this match though, Cody Rhodes was handed a sledgehammer by Brandi Rhodes, which is a weapon that is synonymous with Triple H, and he smashed a throne, which is very similar to one that Triple H has used in the past. Cody Rhodes did this because from day one in AEW, Cody Rhodes was getting comparisons to Triple H because Cody was an executive vice president of AEW, which effectively meant that he had a lot of power in AEW, so he could book himself strong. Kind of like how Triple H had the power to book himself strong in the latter years of his WWE run. And through destroying the throne, Cody Rhodes sent the message to fans that his past in WWE was dead and he would not fall into the same pitfalls that Triple H once did. But anyway, the match between Dustin went on, and everyone was expecting a great match between the two men, but no one expected it to be that damn good and that damn bloody. Despite Cody Rhodes being a massive babyface at this moment, he was playing the heel in this match, as he busted open Dustin Rhodes pretty bad, and Cody basically brutalized Dustin for the whole match. And this invoked a lot of emotion out of the audience, and Cody Rhodes picked up the win. But after this match, Cody and Dustin had one of the most wholesome segments in wrestling, when Cody, filled with emotion, asked Dustin to tag team with him for one match, and Dustin accepted. It was kind of like this.
I need my older brother.
This left people in the crowd in tears, and his babyface momentum grew even more. After this match though, Cody Rhodes had a match with Darby Allin, who was a relatively unknown wrestler to a wide-scale American audience, and despite Cody being a babyface, Cody Rhodes once again played the heel in this match, as he was very cocky and underestimated Darby, and this caused them to wrestle to a 20-minute time limit draw. After this match, Shawn Spears appeared in the ring and gave Cody the infamous chair shot to the head that left Cody Rhodes in a pool of blood. And this chair shot left a lot of fans angry and upset because they knew how much head chair shots can cause CTE. But nonetheless, the chair shot to the head garnered a lot of sympathy from the fans for Cody Rhodes, which furthered his momentum as a babyface. Their feud culminated at AEW's All Out 2019, and this was a really good match in which Cody Rhodes took the win. The fact that Cody took the win rubbed some people the wrong way because they felt that Shawn Spears should have taken the win, but nonetheless, it was understandable why Cody took the win as his stock as a babyface was growing like crazy. After Cody's match with Shawn Spears at All Out, he entered into a feud with the AEW World Champion at the time, Chris Jericho, and this feud was really entertaining. But where this feud really shone bright was on the Dynamite episode just before AEW's Full Gear 2019, in Cody Rhodes From Undesirable to Undeniable promo. In this promo, Cody Rhodes addressed the small rumblings of fans that criticized him for being in a world title match and him being an EVP at the same time. And in response to this, he announced that if he lost the match to Chris Jericho at Full Gear, he would never ever challenge for the AEW World Championship, which upset the fans because they were very behind him. Cody Rhodes also talked about his father and how it took him 14 years to go from undesirable to undeniable. And Cody Rhodes was at the verge of tears when he said this. This promo was goosebump inducing because as a viewer, you could almost feel the emotion and weight of Cody Rhodes' words. And at this point, it was actually impossible to not cheer for Cody Rhodes. This promo really rallied fans behind Cody Rhodes, and his babyface momentum was growing even further. Cody Rhodes and Chris Jericho's feud then culminated at AEW's Full Gear for the AEW World Championship. And the storytelling in this match was top notch, and Cody Rhodes even got busted open the hard way. And towards the end of the match, Chris Jericho had Cody Rhodes in a lion tamer, and Cody Rhodes' right-hand man, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, MJF, threw in the towel on the behalf of Cody Rhodes, and this caused Cody to forfeit the match. And this effectively meant that Cody Rhodes would never be able to challenge for the AEW World Championship again. After this match, Cody Rhodes was evidently mad while a crying MJF apologized to him. But just as Cody was about to forgive MJF kicked him in the nuts and turned on his best friend. And this further solidified the crowd support for Cody because he had been screwed out of the title by someone he trusted so much. Even though this was shocking, everyone saw this from a mile away because MJF was one of the most dastardly heels in wrestling at that time. After this betrayal, Cody Rhodes was so mad at what his former best friend did that he was desperate to get revenge on MJF. But MJF said that he would never ever wrestle Cody Rhodes. So Cody Rhodes told MJF to name his price, and MJF said that he would face Cody at AEW's Revolution 2020 on 3 conditions. The first condition was that Cody could not touch MJF until their match at Revolution. The second condition was that Cody had to face MJF's right-hand man, Wardlow, in a steel cage match. And this match did not disappoint, as it was very brutal, and Cody Rhodes even got busted open during this match, which once again caused a lot of sympathy from the fans to be directed at him. Cody Rhodes won this match in a spectacular fashion by moonsaulting off the top of the steel cage, and he ended that episode of Dynamite screaming like a lion at the top of the cage, and the fans loved this. The third condition was that Cody Rhodes had to take 10 lashes on live TV from MJF, and this segment was one of the most hard to watch segments in AEW history, as the lashes that MJF gave Cody were unforgiving. These lashes really garnered a boatload of sympathy for Cody from the fans because Cody was genuinely almost crying from the lashes he received. This segment solidified Cody Rhodes as the top babyface in all of wrestling at that point, as the months and months of momentum had snowballed, and now Cody Rhodes was red hot. And heading into Revolution 2020, Cody and MJF's feud was the hottest feud in wrestling, and at this time it seems like Cody Rhodes let his popularity get to his head, as at AEW Revolution 2020 he debuted his god-awful neck tattoo. Seriously though, I've never seen someone that sad after getting a tattoo. I wrote a bunch of Cody jokes that didn't make this video, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a video where I just straight up roast Cody Rhodes. And leave a like while you're at it. But anyway, the match really didn't live up to the hype, as it was just okay, and Cody Rhodes took the loss in this match. But it didn't really matter because Cody Rhodes was still hot as holy hell. After this match, the pandemic started, and the first person everybody saw on AEW television was Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes was standing in the middle of the ring in an empty arena, asking mankind to stand together in the face of the unprecedented coronavirus. The world was going mad at this point, so seeing Cody speak so earnestly into the camera was a soothing balm to a lot of raw nerves. Even though the pandemic stripped Cody of some of his momentum, he was still a hero in many people's eyes. The early pandemic episodes of AEW were pretty rough, to be completely honest, because it was very difficult to get accustomed to wrestling without a crowd. So needless to say, AEW Dynamite as a show was in a pretty bad state. That is until the tournament to crown the inaugural TNT champion was announced. This tournament really gave viewers something to look forward to, and Cody Rhodes was announced as a participant in this tournament. Cody Rhodes defeated Shawn Spears in the first round, and in the second round, Cody Rhodes faced Darby Allin, who he had defeated earlier in the year by the skin of his teeth, and in their third match together in the TNT title tournament, Cody Rhodes once again beat Darby Allin just by the skin of his teeth. And just like that, he was in the final against Lance Archer. And at AEW's Double or Nothing 2020, their match went on, and this was a really good match, with Cody Rhodes picking up the win and Iron Mike Tyson presenting Cody Rhodes with the title. And some of the fans at home were of the impression that Lance Archer should have actually won, but in general, people were happy to see Cody winning. And from this point on, Cody Rhodes went on the run of his life with the TNT Championship, as he did an open challenge for the TNT Championship, in which he invited challengers from AEW and the independents. Cody Rhodes' open challenge was so special because it really captured the essence of unpredictability, as it was must-see TV. And many of us got introduced to our new favorites for the first time, like Eddie Kingston and Ricky Starks, who were later signed to AEW contracts. Even though Cody Rhodes worked as a heel in a lot of these matches, Cody's open challenge really resonated with the viewers because watching Cody's weekly struggle for victory really was a like to everybody's struggle to make it through the week, the day, or even the next hour, because due to the pandemic, things were really hard. Cody's open challenge was going amazing, but then enter Brodie Lee, formerly known as Luke Harper in WWE and the current leader of the Dark Order. And in Cody and Brodie's first match, Brodie Lee absolutely destroyed Cody Rhodes and squashed him in about 3 minutes and became the new TNT champion and decimated him and the Nightmare family afterwards. Even though Cody's awesome open challenge came to an end, it was understandable because all good things have to come to an end, and Cody Rhodes put the much deserving Brodie Lee over like crazy, and it really solidified Brodie Lee as a monster heel in AEW. But 5 weeks later, Cody Rhodes returned with black hair, and Cody returning with black hair was a tease for him turning heel. And Brodie Lee challenged Cody Rhodes to a dog collar match, in which Cody accepted the following week. There was a lot of pressure on Cody and Brodie to deliver in this match because the dog collar match is notorious for how bloody and brutal it is, but Cody and Brodie lived up to the hype of this match, as this match was very brutal and both men were a bloody mess. This match was amazing and was very fitting for Brodie Lee's last match ever, but the finish of this match upset a lot of people as Cody Rhodes picked up the win and regained the TNT Championship. And this sowed the first seeds of hate towards Cody Rhodes, because it was revealed that he only dropped the TNT Championship so that he could go to Hollywood to film and be the judge on a talent show called The Go Big Show. This effectively meant that Brodie Lee only won the TNT Championship because Cody went to Hollywood, not because it was the original plan and not because Brodie Lee deserved it. This upset a lot of people because Brodie Lee was killing it with the TNT Championship, and the fans wanted to see him hold the TNT Championship for longer because they felt his reign was too short at 46 days. People saw Brodie Lee as being the sacrificial lamb to Cody Rhodes' ego. Cody then put Darby Allin over huge when Darby Allin won the TNT Championship at AEW's Full Gear 2020. But despite this, the glass started to crack for Cody Rhodes, as people began to see Cody Rhodes as a self-serving wrestler in management that books himself strong so he can look good. The rose-tinted lens that fans saw Cody Rhodes in began to fade, and this is where Cody Rhodes' descent into character purgatory started, as all the things from this point on that made Cody so special and made fans love him so much were exactly the things that fans started to despise, like his unnecessarily long entrance prelude song before his actual entrance music, and his unnecessarily excessive pyro that was more than anybody else in AEW. and his tendency to bleed all the time in big matches, and his tendency to get close to tears during his promos to gain sympathy from the viewers, and the fact that he won a boatload of matches over younger talent. All of these things that made Cody a hero in so many people's eyes started to turn him into a villain, and this is when questions of the content of Cody Rhodes' character arose. Was Cody Rhodes the villain all along? They say you are who you hang out with, so why did Cody Rhodes hang out so much with a bastard like MJF? Why does Cody Rhodes constantly play the heel in matches even though he's been a babyface his entire run? Why is Cody Rhodes always on my TV screen when the women of AEW are struggling just to get minutes on TV? The questions were endless, but something came across as incredibly phony with Cody Rhodes, as he started to come across as a try-hard babyface. In the Young Bucks book, Killing the Business, they detailed the first time they met Cody Rhodes, and this is what they said. He was a charming fellow, but he had a strange habit of smiling after every other word. Who smiles this much? The Young Bucks' first encounter with Cody Rhodes perfectly encapsulates the essence of his character. Usually people who smile way too much are trying to hide something, and you get this impression with Cody Rhodes as something just comes off as ingenuine about him. Like he's tricking everyone into thinking he's a good person when he's actually incredibly selfish and self-centered. Now I'm not saying he's definitely all these things, but it's definitely food for thought. After Cody's match versus Darby at Full Gear, he entered into a feud with basketball legend Shaquille O'Neal, and even though his feud and mixed match with Shaquille O'Neal was generally well received, it further showed Cody in a light where he was shallow, as a feud with a celebrity feels very WWE style and felt very Hollywood. And Cody Rhodes changing his bang of an entrance song to a crappy Snoop Dogg remix to promote the Go Big Show did not help Cody Rhodes' cause. And Cody's announcement that he and Brandi were expecting a baby girl in a grandiose fashion also did not help his cause, as it was a cool announcement and everyone was genuinely happy for Brandi and Cody, but this announcement was a little bit over the top and unnecessary to do it in the fashion that it was done in. And this once again highlighted the vain nature that fans perceive Cody operated in. And Cody and Brandi also announced the reality TV show Road to the Top, which once again also felt very Hollywood, and it felt that Cody was selling out. All of these small little details really caused fans to see Cody in a different light, and while there were no loud boos for him at this time, the hate for Cody Rhodes started to brew, and at this point, his Nightmare family member QT Marshall turned on him. And him feuding with QT Marshall for a long time didn't help, but Cody's feud with Anthony Ogogo really put the nail in the coffin of why so many people do not like Cody Rhodes today. Anthony Ogogo is an English Olympian bronze medalist in boxing that transitioned into wrestling, and he was a student of Cody Rhodes, but he turned on Cody Rhodes along with QT Marshall. And Cody and Ogogo's feud was doomed from the start, as it quickly turned into a nationalist versus nationalist, UK versus USA feud. And Anthony Ogogo was bad-mouthing the USA, and Cody Rhodes was defending the USA while passionately exhibiting his patriotism. The problem with this angle was that it was terribly outdated, and it maybe would have worked many years ago, but not in this current day and age. And Cody cut a promo right before AEW's Double or Nothing 2021 on Anthony Ogogo, and in this promo, he talked about race relations in America, and he was even at the verge of tears at one point when he talked about his future biracial daughter. And as Cody Rhodes kept talking, the crowd got progressively more quiet. This promo was tone deaf to say the least, and Cody Rhodes himself explained what was wrong with this promo perfectly, as he said this: "A white guy talking about race relations who has an American flag tattoo on his neck. I can see why people would use the word tone deaf when it came to that." In this feud, there were small rumblings of boos that started for Cody Rhodes, but nonetheless, Cody pressed on, and at AEW's Double or Nothing 2021, Cody faced off against Anthony Ogogo. And due to the patriotic nature of this feud, Cody Rhodes was the American dream for one night only, which was an homage to his father. And at Double or Nothing, this is where Cody debuted his Homelander gear. For those who don't know, Homelander is an American patriotic character in the comic book series The Boys, who on the surface is an affable, modest, and sincere character, but is actually an arrogant, narcissistic a-hole who cares little for those who he claims to care about so much. Homelander is a character that is a villain but thinks he's a good guy, and this sounds a little too familiar to Cody Rhodes. But anyway, this match was pretty good, especially considering that it was Ogogo's first wrestling match on a big stage, and many people were hoping for Ogogo to pick up the win, but Cody picked up the win, and this upset a lot of fans because they felt that the wrong person won. And this was oddly reminiscent of another racially charged feud where the wrong man won. Triple H said some pretty offside things with racial undertones to Booker T in 2003, but still went over Booker T at that year's WrestleMania. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that what Cody said to Ogogo was of the magnitude of what Triple H said to Booker T, but Cody Rhodes' program with Ogogo just highlighted why Cody Rhodes is compared to Triple H so much. Why does Triple H's music fit so well to Cody Rhodes? Triple H has a reputation for abusing his power, and now Cody Rhodes is developing that same reputation. Cody's been denying the comparisons to Triple H from the very beginning, but as time goes on, the comparisons ring more and more true. And at this point, the fans started to boo Cody Rhodes even more, and they begged Cody Rhodes to turn heel. But Cody proclaimed many times during interviews that he's not going to turn heel, as he saw it as the easy way out. And then Malakai Black entered the fray, formerly known as Aleister Black in WWE. And Malakai Black represented an untapped goldmine of potential with his intricate and detailed character, and he was pitted against a guy who had quite honestly been telling the same story since the beginning of AEW with little variation, and fans were getting tired of it. Even though Malakai Black played the traditional heel in this feud and Cody was the face, everything Malakai did was cheered and everything Cody did was booed. It seemed like Cody learned the hard way that it takes much more than smiling, looking pretty, and cutting a good promo to be a babyface. You actually have to be relatable and make an emotional connection with the fans. But something about Cody's just seemed to be too calculated, and fans caught onto this. And the boos continued to grow despite Cody still being a babyface. And in Malakai Black and Cody Rhodes' first match, Malakai Black defeated Cody Rhodes in an extremely dominant manner. And after this match, Cody cut a promo in which he reflected over his career, and this felt like a retirement speech. And he didn't explicitly say that he is retiring, but he started to take off his boots so he could leave them in the middle of the ring, and before he could get his second boot off, Malakai Black whacked Cody in the back with a crutch. This post-match segment felt very weird to say the least, and afterwards Cody Rhodes left to go to Hollywood to film season 2 of the Go Big Show. And in the meantime, while Cody was away, Malakai Black ran through the rest of the Nightmare family, and Cody and Malakai Black's second match was announced. And after 5 weeks, Cody Rhodes returned at AEW's biggest show ever in front of 20,000 people in New York City in the Arthur Ashe Stadium, and the fans booed Cody Rhodes like crazy. But could you blame them? He had a very boo-worthy long-ass cape. Black and Cody wrestled an amazing match, and Cody Rhodes took the loss for the second time. Cody Rhodes' feud with Malakai Black was strikingly similar to his feud with Brodie Lee in terms of the timeline. Brodie Lee and Malakai Black were both former WWE talents who got to AEW, and they both beat Cody in a dominant fashion, and then Cody went off for about 5 weeks to Hollywood, and then when he returned, he had another match with him. Cody saw the mistake of him going over Brodie Lee in their second match, and he tried to right that wrong a year later by having Malakai Black beat him for a second time. But it was a little too late to fix that wrong, as the crowd at this point had turned on Cody, and it was evident the following week when Cody Rhodes threw his waist belt into the crowd and they threw it right back. Cody Rhodes then continued feuding with Malakai Black, and Arn Anderson felt that Cody Rhodes was losing so much because he was too distracted by Hollywood, so he refused to coach Cody Rhodes, and Glock Anderson was born. Arn Anderson took him back and he basically retrained Cody from the ground up, and this set up Cody and Malakai Black's third match. And in this match, a bloodied Cody put Malakai Black in a pedigree position, which is the finishing move of Triple H, but then Cody turned this into a tiger driver and he beat Malakai Black with this, much to the fans' dismay. And this caused even more people to hop on the Cody Rhodes hate train, and Cody Rhodes then cut this promo where he confirmed that he's never going to turn heel. And the whole essence of this promo was Cody saying, "I'm sorry for acting like a douchebag before, please cheer for me." But like I said before, it was already too late, and Cody started to finally understand that. And from this point on, Cody showed how self-aware he is as a character, as he leaned into the hate and started to do things that teased him turning heel, like whipping out a sledgehammer during his match with Andrade Idolo, which was once again a reference to Triple H, and also whipping out a golden shovel, which indicated that he was acknowledging that he buries up-and-coming talent. And Cody Rhodes also took a bump through a table of fire, And while this was awesome to watch, it felt like Cody Rhodes was really trying hard to get the fans to cheer him again. Cody Rhodes reinforced all of the negative perceptions about him when he won the TNT Championship for a third time against Sammy Guevara, and Cody Rhodes seemed super ecstatic to win the TNT Championship over a young up-and-coming talent. And that's where we are in the story of Cody Rhodes. The debate is always in the air whether Cody Rhodes is a babyface or a heel, and throughout this video, enough evidence has been shown to prove that he's both a babyface and a heel. And Cody's been this way since day one of AEW. That's probably why Cody Rhodes enters through the middle of the stage and not the heel tunnel or the babyface tunnel. Earlier in the video, I said that as much as Cody Rhodes is a babyface and a heel at the same time, he also is neither of these things, and what I meant by that is Cody Rhodes is just human. Cody Rhodes does what he thinks is right at all times, and sometimes that causes him to make mistakes. And this is the same thought pattern that's in normal people just like you and me. There's a quote that says, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And Cody Rhodes has become the villain in his own story, just like how most people eventually do in real life. Cody Rhodes' father, Dusty Rhodes, had a gimmick of being the common man, as he talked a lot about the struggles of a blue-collar lifestyle, and he had the physique of a common man. Even though Cody does not talk about the struggles of the blue-collar lifestyle, and he has an excellent physique, he has inherited his father's common man way of thinking, because he's just a human, and that's what makes his character so interesting and intriguing, and I can't wait to see where his character goes. Thank you very much for watching the video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. But anyway, goodbye you jobbers.